My project, I'm a lecturer in international relations, an academic at the University of Plymouth, and my research is on development issues in Zambia. Do you want me to not use it? I can shout quite loud. Does that help? I don't think it's this though, is it? Okay, I'll shout while that gets sorted out. My research is on African development issues, and I've been doing research in Zambia for about the last 10 years. I discovered solar cookers sometime last year, and obviously I'd known about the very old-fashioned sort of a solar oven in a box kind of design for a long time, and I did try to talk to African communities about that when I first went there 10 years ago. The response I got across the board was a flat rate, we don't cook in ovens, which they don't, right? So an oven is about as useful to the average Zambian family as, I don't know, a large pair of wellies or something, right? So I found out about these amazing parabolic solar cookers in the last couple of years, and I finally managed to take some to Africa. Now, first of all, I'll tell you a little bit about what they do.
Unplug the HDMI.
Sorry?
I think if you unplug the HDMI, it'll stop the noise. The HDMI cable inside of the laptop.
But then it'll also stop that. Okay, fine. I can do it without that. No. That's pretty better without the noise and without the slides, isn't it? Rather than with them. Okay, so a parabolic solar cooker is very simply, looks like a satellite dish, and it has a stand in the centre to put your saucepan on. It's a very simple technology compared to all the amazing technological applications that you've been talking about in other talks. That's the only thing clever about it, is its shape. It has to be perfectly a scientific parabolic dish. So, these cookers are made of steel. They're lined with reflective adhesive tape, and when I came across them, it struck me that they would be a fantastic thing to supply to communities in Zambia, largely because, well, for three main reasons. Firstly, because Zambia has one of the highest rates of deforestation in the world. Most of that, the vast majority of that deforestation is due to using firewood for fuel, cooking fuel, and burning wood for charcoal, also to produce cooking fuel. Nothing to do with illegal logging or meat production or any of the other issues that are around deforestation in other parts of the world. There's also about 70% of Zambians who live under the international poverty line of $2 a day. A significant proportion of them live on far less than that. So these are people for whom any reduction in costs for their household has an obvious benefit immediately and automatically. Third, one of the main causes of death in Zambia and many other southern African countries is respiratory diseases caused by the inhalation of smoke while people are cooking. And also there's a very high level of death from waterborne diseases, because around about 35% of Zambians, according to the official statistics, rely on unimproved water sources. In practice, it's a much higher number than that. And also in practice, a lot of what's technically called an improved water source, you wouldn't drink it, I wouldn't drink it, most people would be well advised not to drink it, okay? Most Zambians know that they should boil the water that they get before they drink it. But in the context of having to collect firewood or collect animal dung and dry it through a very labour-intensive process in remote areas, or by charcoal, most people don't do it. So they know that they're giving their children dirty water that's probably going to cause them some disease, some diarrhoea, that can be life-threatening, but they're not in a position to do anything about that. So last year I started off by finding out about these amazing stoves, and I wanted to take them to Zambia. Oh, that's the other one. Oh, maybe it is. Okay, so I wanted to take them to Zambia to experiment with them, see how people took them, see if they could be worked into the very culturally specific rituals of cooking, which is the reality of what cooking and food is, highly culturally specific. In trying to take one to experiment with, I found that the transportation costs were extremely expensive, These cookers that I have been distributing are designed and sold out of Johannesburg in South Africa, but even that short distance is across at least 2 African borders, and that means that timescales are unreliable and very expensive, and it's very, very expensive. So in trying to take one, I started talking to my friends and family about all the problems I was encountering with transportation, and lots of them said, well, that sounds like a great idea. It's going to relieve poverty, it's going to prevent deforestation, and create clean water for people to drink, and let's not forget a whole range of other health benefits associated, like being able to wash in warm water, being able to wash your clothes in warm water, your dishes in warm water. All of these things are very well documented to have a very simplistic, high impact on the level of people's poverty. So in the end, by the time I went to Zambia in September of last year, I had enough donations to take 5 cookers, one of which I had paid for myself. They cost about £100 each, so I'm not talking about huge amounts of money. When I got back from Zambia, having introduced them to a number of families, I kept in touch with those families. I recognised immediately what a huge impact it was having on their lives, and people using them for very diverse purposes. Like one of the ladies I gave one to said, I'm renting it out for periods. So other people in my community telling them that 2 hours cooking costs X amount. It's less than charcoal. People are queuing up to do it. That's great. And that's also reducing deforestation even further. Some other of the ladies were frying and cooking various foods on the cookers and then selling them at the market for the normal standard price, which is the way everything works. There's not very much competition on price. But if you can reduce the cost of your overhead significantly, which is what a solar cooker does, then you're making a lot more profit on everything that you sell. So having seen how much of an impact that it had, I then at my university noticed a course advertised for crowdfunding, and I thought, well, maybe I'll just go along and see what that's all about. And so I went to the first session and thought, this is going to be great. It really appealed to me because in my research, in my work, I do a lot of thinking about how people relate to charities and organisations and why they give money and what kind of relationships we're building up and what kind of dependencies we're building up in the world through a lot of those transfers. And solar cookers seem to be a great way of negating some of those problems. Using a crowdfunded structure, I could say to people, if you want to buy a solar cooker, I'll deliver it for you in Zambia. So there were no rewards, there was no marketing. I mean, the usual crowdfunding approach is that you get very competitive rewards, as they call them, and you sell those rewards to people, and people ostensibly get the benefit in buying the reward itself, and then the money also goes to the good cause. I decided not to do that. What I wanted to give was an opportunity for people to say, look, here's an idea, what do you think about it? Let the people scrutinise the idea themselves, and I thought that would be a way of keeping people engaged in what they were really giving money towards, rather than a huge load of things that they don't know that they're giving money towards. So I promoted it as direct wealth redistribution. Many of us in the UK have, if we lose 100 quid on the street today, it's not going to make any difference to our lives at all. Maybe it might make a bit of a difference to some of us. We might not go out on Friday night or something, but then we'd be right back up to account balance normal. And so this idea of direct wealth, if you buy a product here, effectively, virtually speaking, and I deliver it somewhere in Africa, I thought was quite powerful. So far what this project is direct wealth redistribution through the internet. If people gave me money towards the cooker, when I came back, I did a write-up. I told them exactly which family their cooker had gone to. I haven't gone as far as putting people in contact, because most of the communities are not really contactable. A lot of people don't speak English very well, that kind of thing. So there's a bit of an issue with directly putting people into contact if you're trying to reach those really remote communities, because even though a lot of people do have mobile phones, most of them don't have the internet on them. It's not quite that sophisticated in that most needy category. So I think the crowdfunding worked really well in that respect. The place where it probably impossibly fell down for me to some extent was that and I'd sort of warn you if you want to use that platform, is that of course there is a commission. So if your mum wants to give you some money towards your new business, be nice to not put her through the crowdfunding platform unless you're trying to really market the idea that you're getting lots of donations, because you're paying a 6% commission on every donation that you get. So crowdfunding was great to get out to a wider audience, but looking back on it, I probably would have channeled a lot of those direct donations that were based on me rather than a web presence slightly differently. I think that's all I was going to say. Maybe other things come out.
Hi, we talked a bit previously about open hardware, and I just wondered, can these be made in Africa, or do you need to just,
Well, at the moment, I think no, because the shape has to be so perfect to create the efficiency. This is where the real problem is. So a couple of organisations have approached local metal workers, tried to see what they can make. They just don't have the precision at the moment. You only need a slight imperfection in the shape, and the whole concept is broken down. They did start off making them in South Africa, which is the only country that might possibly have potential to do it. But there's a sort of environmental paradox to some extent, in the sense that in South Africa their smelters will only use virgin steel, for want of a better word, original steel. In China they're being manufactured out of recycled steel, which means that the composite is stronger. It doesn't have to be as thick to make it so strong, and all of the other implications of it being recycled. So at the moment, that's the approach they're taking. They've been designed by a very small company in South Africa with a particular view to keeping the cost as low as possible and making them as simple as possible to put together so that they can be shipped to rural communities and no one ever has a problem with it. So the package comes, you get given a spanner in the box, and that's the only tool you need to put the whole thing together. That's maybe something that I didn't say. One of the reasons that I think this was such a good intervention is because once we've given it, that's it. There's no dependency in knowledge terms or in technical expertise. So it can't break down. There's nothing about it that can break. The only thing that can possibly go wrong is that the reflective surface breaks down over time. My plan at the moment is to try to keep enough contact with communities that when that happens, I can supply them with more tape. But obviously I don't have to be there to do it for them. It's simply sticking the tape onto the dish. So anyone can do it. There's no tools, no knowledge needed.
Have you partnered with any charities?
No.
And have you had any contact with anyone?
No. There's a reason for that. I've got quite a lot of friends who work in the charity sector, and we tried to do some calculations together one night, not too late, so I think they're fairly reliable. And they reckoned that if I worked through one of their charities, probably cost around about £2,000 to get to the point of actually giving a family a cooker, because of the costs of running a headquarters here, all of the baseline studies that need to be done, all of the accountability. Now, to some extent, it's reasonable that going through that kind of structure costs more, because there are some benefits in terms of accountability and checking that your money is going to the right place and all of those other things. What I am sort of trying to toy around with is the idea that we skip that on the principle that if you can buy 20 cookers for the cost of one, I'm willing to take the risk that some people misuse them. It seems to be reasonable to me that you wouldn't get such a high level of misuse that you would have to worry about that too much. The reality is that there aren't that many people in a country like Zambia who can afford to buy these things. The transportation costs and difficulties and practicalities and the weight of the cookers themselves negate the idea that they're going to be exported to a different country and then sold there. So, I think the worst that can happen in terms of them being misused is that they get stolen locally and used by someone else locally. For the most part, it seems that community systems are quite resilient to those kinds of things happening, and generally people will engage with that process if it starts to happen, and they'll object to it in a very local way. But anyway, they're not things that could be used for anything else. So if they do get nicked, then presumably the person that nicks them wants to use it for cooking on. There's no other purpose to it. Additionally, if the very poor family suddenly have a load of expenses and think, actually, this might be a great idea that gives us free cooking forever, but actually we can't afford it because we need to pay for a funeral or some medical expenses or whatever, these immediate costs, then fine, sell it cheaply, get yourself out of that problem with poverty. But the point is that somebody else somewhere in the country will be using it, and so it will still have all of the same impacts in terms of reducing deforestation and all of those important impacts.
Have you heard of a crowdfunding platform called Whatsi?
Whatsi?
Have you heard of Whatsi?
No.
W-A-S-T-I. Oh, W-A-T.
Is that is it like a community?
It funds. It's specific towards medical costs for people in other countries, and it's basically what they've done is they've cut out the middleman, and they directly give money to the families to pay for medical costs. Now, you maybe wouldn't be able to do that exactly because you're importing stuff, but
sure, yeah.
I think there's something to be said studying that platform, because it really makes the user really feel like they're connected to the end user.
Yeah, absolutely.
And and it's very successful.
Thank you. Yeah.
Last question.
I think what you're doing is really cool, and I share your pessimism about charities and the passion to try and make things
I
lateral.
apologise to everyone who's involved in really good charities, because of course loads of charities do it really well.
Well, it's difficult to maintain a hierarchical structure when you're working with local communities, but there's one organization that does it really, really, really well, and it's called the Barefoot College, and they're based in Rajasthan, and they've actually done solar cookers using recycled materials, working with they only work with the elderly women in the village, mostly illiterate. They train them on how to, develop their own solar cookers, solar water heaters, and even solar panels in just a few days' time. And the problems of accountability tend to be solved by just excluding the men. You get the men out of the room, and then,
Well, I'm certainly not going to stand here and say that.
I'm more than happy to say it, and they do it really well. They do a great job. They only work with the illiterate grandmothers of the village, and they do an awesome job.
I mean, it is important. I did this presentation a couple of days ago to another group, and somebody said afterwards, well, this seems like, they sent me an email afterwards and said, that sounded like such a good idea, but then I went home and I looked online, and actually, you don't need to spend £100 on a cooker like this. You can do it. He sent me a YouTube video that said, look at this solar oven you can build for $5. Now, firstly, total misrepresentation, because they don't give tyres away and painted glass away for free in Africa. Even the newspaper and the foil would have an associated cost. You have to have a specific type of saucepan to make it work efficiently, and so on. But the main thing is that the more simplistic designs and the less manufactured designs, usually the ones that you can make out of natural materials, for Zambia's specific context, the staple food is shima, ugali, pap. For anyone who's travelled in Africa is probably familiar with it. It's ground maize, boiled very hard into a paste, and then you have to put a lot of work into getting all the lumps out. Now, that means that it's just simply not suitable to be cooked in a slow cooker, solar oven style thing. Maybe one day, when all of the trees are gone, you might get people to think about changing what they eat. I'm sort of trying to anticipate it before we get to that stage. And to some extent, this is an expensive way of doing it, but in other ways, I think it's an incredibly cheap way of doing it.
Yeah, thank you very much, Dr. Karen.